Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes you read something and you just have to read it again. That happened to me with this news. Federal workers now need to list 5 accomplishments each week. It's a directive that's really got people talking.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And the backstory here isn't exactly straightforward bureaucracy.
Hmm.
You know, our sources suggest the idea sort of surfaced with Donald Trump first.
Oh, right.
Then Elon Musk picked it up, kind of reiterated it, and then it got formalized, like officially, in a memo from the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. Basically, the government's HR sent out to all the departments. Pretty unusual path, wouldn't you say?
Definitely sounds like a winding road. And the deadline was pretty quick, too. Midday last Monday, was it?
That's what the sources say. Yeah, midday Monday.
Then the consequence, Elon Musk initially said, if you don't submit the list, that's like your resignation.
He did indicate that, yes, that failure to submit would essentially be treated as resigning.
Okay, wow. Let's really dig into this. 5 accomplishments every single week. For some jobs, maybe you can tick those off pretty easily. But think about the huge range of jobs in the federal government.
Well, that really hits on a key point, doesn't it? The actual nature of a lot of federal work.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about, assembling 5 widgets by Friday.
Right.
These roles often involve really complex long-term projects.
Yeah.
Or like crucial oversight work, delivering essential services that, well, they don't always break down neatly into 5 weekly bullet points labeled accomplishments.
Exactly.
Take researchers at NIH, maybe, or policy analysts at HUD. Their progress, their real impact, might only be clear over months, maybe even years. How do you list 5 things for that week?
That's the thing. So with that challenge, it's probably not a huge surprise that the reaction online has been, well, let's just say less than positive.
Mm-hmm.
There's been quite a bit of mockery, actually. And you can kind of see why, right? Trying to quantify some of these really vital but sometimes less visible jobs into a weekly checklist.
Yeah, the online stuff, and specifically that meme Trump shared on Truth Social, it really seems to highlight a disconnect, maybe, between this directive and what the work actually involves.
That SpongeBob one.
That's the one. Reworked, listing things like cried about Trump and read some emails. Now, obviously intended as humor, but you could argue it also, points to the anxieties these workers might feel and maybe trivializes the critical stuff they actually do.
It really could. And our source makes a big point here. These are mostly career civil servants. They aren't political appointees just passing through.
Right, not temporary.
We're talking about people who've dedicated years, sometimes decades, to making the government run. They're in the Defense Department, the State Department, FDA, EPA, HUD, education. The list just goes on and on.
Absolutely. They provide that essential stability, that specialized knowledge across so many critical areas.
So this online reaction, while maybe a bit funny on the surface, it also hints at a deeper worry. One our source highlights when it talks about the potential economic side effects.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, economically speaking. You have economists and even some Republican mayors and city councils in places with a lot of federal workers starting to talk about, the possibility of layoffs, widespread layoffs.
Right, because Musk's comment about noncompliance equals resignation, even if it was specific, it could reflect a mindset that might lead to big staff cuts.
Potentially, yes.
And like our source points out, federal jobs aren't just in D.C., they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Federal facilities, federal employees, in communities all across the country.
Exactly. And that's where the potential ripple effect comes in.
Yes.
On local economies. If a large number of federal workers suddenly lost their jobs, well, that's a big shock for those towns and cities. These are people, who own homes there, shop at local businesses, pay local taxes. Taking them out of the equation could really hurt local demand, which, as the economists in the source suggest, could contribute to a wider downturn, maybe even a recession. There's this idea in economics, the government employment multiplier. Basically, cutting federal payrolls doesn't just affect those workers, it hits local businesses, other jobs. It contracts the whole local economy.
So bringing it all together, we have this directive, seems a bit out of touch with the work itself, maybe. Then this wave of online mockery highlighting that, and then these very real concerns about mass job losses and serious economic fallout. Feels like a lot of tension points.
It really raises a fundamental question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how society values the civil service. These are the folks with the institutional memory, doing the essential functions, often way behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actions that hit their morale, their job security, that could have real long-term consequences for how well our public institutions actually work.
It definitely makes you pause and think. Consider the potential disruption, not just for these public servants, but for the services we all rely on, and maybe even the health of the wider economy. So for you listening, even if you're not a federal employee, this could have ripple effects maybe on services you use or your local economy if there's a federal presence nearby.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it's worth just thinking about those broader implications. What message does it send when, missing a weekly checklist could potentially mean losing your job, especially for career public servants? And what are the long-term economic risks of maybe destabilizing such a big part of the workforce? Definitely something to keep pondering.